Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabi ajma'in. We are in hadith number 113. Last time we began the unit on wudu. So these next several hadith, few dozen hadith, will be pretty straightforward, things that you're already used to, but it's good to review. And it's good to actually hear the evidences for what we always have been doing. Right? So, Bab at-Takhfif fil wudu, the chapter about lightening your wudu, meaning doing the minimum. All right, so what's that? عن ابن عباس رضي الله تعالى عنهما أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم نام حتى نفخ ثم صلى ولم يتوضأ وربما قال اضطجع حتى نفخ ثم قام فصلى. All right, so when we say takhfif fil wudu, lightening the practices of wudu, or what you do for wudu, essentially what we're going to be looking at is what are some of the things that might happen that will make doing wudu a little bit tedious, right? A little bit annoying, maybe too much, and the Sharia comes to make it lighter for us. This is one way of seeing it. Number two, when it comes to the actual practices, the actual actions of wudu. So in this first hadith, Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu, remember Ibn Abbas is the nephew of one of the wives of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. So he would every now and then sleep in the home of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam when he was by his aunt. So he says that the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam once fell asleep hatta nafakh, until he started to blow. I don't know exactly what this means, but what we can understand is that he was clearly sleeping, but it was a lighter sleep. You know how when you start dozing off, right? You might even hear a little bit of snoring. A lighter, he just fell asleep. But he woke up and he prayed without making wudu again. So he fell asleep, woke up, and did salah without doing wudu. And Ibn Abbas says, he may have even laid down. He laid down a little bit, fell asleep, woke up, and did wudu. All right? So, what do we take from this? What we take from this is the following. Going to sleep invalidates wudu. The initial ruling is, if you fall asleep, your wudu is invalid. Why? Under the assumption that while you are asleep, your body will release certain things. Okay? So, in general, losing consciousness, whether it's voluntary, like going to sleep, or involuntary, like fainting, it breaks your wudu, and you have to make wudu again. An exception to this is if you fall asleep for a few moments. You have a very light sleep. And by a few moments, I mean 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes, something like that. And then you wake up. I don't mean you took a power nap, as they say. Power nap breaks your wudu, 15 minutes or so. But if it's a light sleep, where you're there for just a few minutes, even if you're laying down, regardless of the position. And to better imagine this, we've all experienced the following, where you're tired and you're drowsy and you start to doze off, but you're still thinking and you can still hear, but it's not, you're hearing things, but you can't really, your brain isn't really processing it, but you're hearing or you're thinking and your brain isn't really processing it. This phase or the stage in between being conscious and being asleep, this is kind of the early moments or the few moments of early sleep. So if that's the case, you don't have to make wudu again. All right? عن أسامة بن زيد رضي الله تعالى عنهما, or before that, it said that the companions, and in another hadith, the companions, when they would be waiting for Isha prayer, they'd start dozing off. So they'd be sitting in the masjid waiting for the Prophet ﷺ to come out, and they're dozing off. Remember back then, there were no clocks, there were no alarm clocks, there were no, there wasn't electricity. It was all based on the sun. You wake up when the sun comes out. You go to sleep shortly after the sun setting. I mean, what are you going to do? It's night, it's dark, there's nothing to do. So their challenge wasn't Fajr. Fajr was easy for them because it was naturally the time when they wake up. What was difficult for them is Isha. Staying up until then. Sometimes I get the question, I wake up really early. And it's very hard for me, especially in summer, to stay up until Isha prayer. And I start falling asleep. That's what was going on back then. So while they'd be waiting for the Prophet ﷺ in the masjid, they start dozing off. And the narrator of Hadith would say, when the Prophet would come out and do Salah, they would stand up and they would pray. They wouldn't make wudu again. But again, this is light dozing off. They haven't been there for 30 minutes sleeping, right? Yeah.
I found the meaning of النفس.
What's that?
Okay. I guess it's بس بالنسبة للنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. كان النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا نام نفخ وأحيانا له غطيط وكان لا ينام قلبه وتنام عيناه ولا ينتقد وضوءه بهذا النوم وكل ذلك ثابت في الأحاديث الصحيحة.
So basically, it doesn't really explain much.
It says لا ينافي كمال الحال والهيئة التي كان عليها الرسول وهو ليس بالشهير الذي يكون من الأنف.
Okay.
It's not snoring. So
It's not snoring. It's some sort of blow.
Yeah.
So the Prophet all the time he would blow. Maybe there's a certain medical term for this. I don't know. عن أسامة بن زيد رضي الله تعالى عنهما قال دفع رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من عرفة حتى إذا كان بالشعب نزل فبال ثم توضأ ولم يسبغ الوضوء فقلت الصلاة يا رسول الله فقال الصلاة أمامك فركب فلما جاء المزدلفة نزل فتوضأ فأسبغ الوضوء ثم أقيمت الصلاة فصلى المغرب ثم أناخ كل إنسان بعيره في منزله ثم أقيمت العشاء فصلى ولم يصلي بينهما. Alright, so here, this is capturing a moment when the Prophet ﷺ was performing Hajj. So Usama radiallahu ta'ala anh says that once we finished Arafah, the first thing you do in Hajj is you sit or you stand on the mount of Arafah. Once we did that, we started going towards Muzdalifah. And while we were walking, the Prophet ﷺ got off the path and he used the restroom. He relieved himself. And then Usama says he made wudu, وَلَمْ يُسْبِغْ الْوُضُوء. He didn't do everything in wudu. What does that mean? So, in wudu, our parents taught us how. This is how you do wudu. They gave us the entire package. Or we just observed them doing it, and then we have come to know this as wudu. But in fiqh, there is the bare minimum that is necessary for you to perform wudu, and then there are the sunnahs, the sunan of wudu. Right? What you do for extra reward. All right. What are the bare minimums? Well, the verse in the Quran, Surah Al-Ma'idah, mentions 4 things. Right? فَاغْسِلُوا وُجُوهَكُمْ, wash your faces. وَأَيْدِيَكُمْ إِلَى الْمَرَافِقِ, your arms, including your elbow. وَامْسَحُوا بِرُؤُوسِكُمْ, wipe your head. وَأَرْجُلَكُمْ, wash your feet. إِلَى الْكَعْبَيْن, to the ankles. This is what the verse says. 4 things. It doesn't mention washing the hands. It doesn't mention the mouth and the nose. It doesn't mention the ears. Right? It doesn't mention 3 times. So, what is the bare minimum? You have these 4 parts. That's the bare minimum. And you add to that the intention, which is also alluded to in the verse. إِذَا قُمْتُمْ إِلَى الصَّلَاةِ, if you stand up for salah, meaning you have the intention to pray. So you need intention. Plus, wudu is an act of worship, and an act of worship must have an intention. So that's 5. 6 is the order. These 4 things need to be in order. It needs to be the face first, then the arms, then the head, then the feet. Right? Why? Because the way it was presented in the Quran, in the verse, indicates that the order is something that the verse is considering. Why? Because it's a topic of grammar. So, in Arabic grammar, the vowels at the end of words, there's a certain law that it follows. It's not random, right? And there's a certain structure it follows. One of those laws, so to speak, is that when you list multiple things and some of them have the same vowel end or end vowel, and others have different end vowels, the way you're going to list this is that you pack them. That which has the same end vowel are going to be together, right? So in the verse, 3 of them have the same end vowel, and one of them has a different end vowel. So technically, it would be the 3 that have the same come first, and then the one that's different comes at the end. But the one that's different came number 3, right? So it goes against the standard structure. Now, that's fine in the Arabic language under the condition that it's communicating additional meaning. There's a reason. It's not random. There's a reason for it. So when the scholars asked, what is the reason for it? They said Allah is indicating the order. That it's there as number 3 instead of number 4 to tell us that the order is something that is part of wudu. And then they corroborate that with the fact that the Prophet ﷺ always did wudu in that order. Never once did he change the order up. Yes, he sometimes minimized his wudu, but he never skipped the order. He never did it out of order. So that's number 6. And the last one is al-muwalat, meaning you need to do wudu consecutively. You can't just do one, wash your face, and then go eat dinner, and then come back and then, wash your arms and then go and do something. It has to be one after another, okay? That is the bare minimum of wudu. Again, what's not part of the bare minimum? Doing it 3 times, doing right before left, meaning your right arm before left arm, or your right foot before left foot. If you do your left arm before the right arm, your wudu is fine, right? If you do it once, your wudu is fine, right? The mouth and the nose, although scholars differ, but I'm just giving you kind of the gist here. Mouth and nose aren't included. Washing the hands isn't included, right? The ears isn't included. So when Usama radiallahu ta'ala says that the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam lam yusbigh al-wudu, he didn't fully complete his wudu, he's referring to a more minimal method of performing wudu, right? Now, be careful here. Knowledge can be a double-edged sword. Knowledge is meant to benefit you, right? And as we've been saying, the purpose of learning is to apply it. Or else what's the point? So, you might have heard something new, and that might be exciting to you. Oh, I don't have to do all of this, I could do less. And you know what? Some people end up doing less. Well, has that knowledge now benefited you? No, because you're getting less reward than you were when you didn't know. So, us knowing this doesn't mean forget about the sunnahs. But where it becomes practical is, let's say you have very little water. You're hiking, you went really deep, you have to pray Salah, and you didn't prepare enough water. What are you going to do now? Right? Maybe you can minimize the amount, your wudu, so you minimize the amount of water you use. That's possible. Or maybe you forgot Salah and there's a little bit time left. So you rush to make wudu and you minimize your wudu. Right? Why did the Prophet ﷺ minimize wudu here? It could be because little water, right? Or it could be because there's massive amount of people and he's teaching them. Remember, the Prophet ﷺ is a teacher. He would do things for the purpose of teaching. And in Hajj, another thing that he does is that he prayed all 5 salahs with one wudu. So Umar noticed this. He said, Ya Rasulullah, you've never done this before. You always make wudu before salah. What's the deal here? Like, has it been abrogated or something? He said no. He's just showing us that if you have wudu, you have wudu. You don't have to redo it before each salah. The Prophet used to redo it before each salah. Why? Because of the reward. And remember, I said last time, the most underrated act of worship is wudu. Tremendous reward, right? So perhaps the Prophet ﷺ was just teaching. And remember, there was over 100,000 people who attended the Hajj. So you had massive amount of people. Yes.
Could you elaborate on the ayah, please? You said there's 3 out of the 4 with different endings.
Mm-hmm.
Which, I cannot figure it out.
فَامْسَحُوا وُجُوهَكُمْ with the fatha. فَامْسَحُوا وُجُوهَكُمْ I'm sorry. فَاغْسِلُوا وُجُوهَكُمْ وَأَيْدِيَكُمْ fatha. وَامْسَحُوا رُؤُوسِكُمْ.
Because in the fee.
There's a ba, right?
Yeah.
But if you were to follow the standard structure, it would be
I see.
فَاغْسِلُوا وُجُوهَكُمْ وَأَيْدِيَكُمْ إِلَى الْمَرَافِقِ وَأَرْجُلَكُمْ إِلَى الْكَعْبَيْنِ وَامْسَحُوا بِرُؤُوسِكُم.
I see. Yeah.
That's standard.
Oh, I thought I'm looking at the kum and it's called.
No. The kum is a pronoun.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank
Right.
you. That was which ayah? This is
Ma'idah chapter 5 verse 6.
6.
All right. So Usama tells the Prophet, Ya Rasulullah, it's time for Salah. And the Prophet said, prayer is ahead of you, meaning we'll pray over there. Now, I'll go ahead and just say this. I don't know if it'll come later, but just in case it doesn't come. The Prophet ﷺ, being in Mecca, is traveling, right? His residency is in Medina, so in Mecca he is traveling. And he's saying now, we'll pray ahead, meaning we'll pray once we reach our destination, which was Muzdalifah. Now, Hajj has a certain process for the rituals. Right? It's part of the rituals of Hajj that you pray after you do Arafah. You pray Maghrib and Isha in Muzdalifah. Although technically, Arafah ends at sunset, Maghrib. So if you ever watch, the rituals of Hajj, you'll find that as the sun is going down, the live stream is showing the sun, and people are standing there waiting. Like there's like a line. This is where Arafah ends, and people are standing and waiting until they hear the adhan of Maghrib. So technically, they could just pray Maghrib and Isha there, right? And then just go forward. But none of them do. Why? Because part of the process of Hajj is that you pray Maghrib and Isha in Muzdalifah. Keep that aside from now. Generally, when you are traveling and you're combining prayers, what was the Prophet ﷺ's method for when he combined the prayers? Because if you're combining Dhuhr and Asr, you have from Dhuhr until the start of Maghrib to pray Dhuhr and Asr. And for Isha, you have from Maghrib until the end of Isha to pray Maghrib and Isha. How would the Prophet ﷺ do it? Would he always just, at the beginning of the time, do both? Or was it a little bit different? Because remember, when the sunnah, or what is recommended and encouraged, is that you pray your salah at the earliest time. Right? You stop what you're doing and you pray salah. But for combining prayers, the method of the Prophet ﷺ was as follows. If the time entered while he was resting, he would pray then, before continuing. But if the prayer time entered while he was moving, he would wait till he reaches the place where he rests, and then he would pray there. Okay, how does that translate in our time today? You're traveling to wherever, right? You're on your way to LAX, and Salah enters. Let's say you're going to Dallas, right? And Salah enters, Dhuhr enters while you're at LAX waiting at the gates. And you know that you will be in Dallas at your hotel or whoever you're visiting before Maghrib enters. the Prophet ﷺ would wait until he reaches there and pray there. Right? Whereas, let's say you are traveling and Salah enters while you are on a long transit, let's say. So you're going internationally and you have a layover, that's 7 hours. Salah enters. Let's say less than 7 hours. Let's say 3 hours. You have plenty of time to pray and whatever before leaving. The Prophet ﷺ would pray while in the layover and then continue. Right? So you calculate it that way. Now, I know when you're traveling, things can happen, and if you just want to pray, you could pray. You can pray any time between these two periods. If you want to pray on the plane, whatever. What I'm saying is how the Prophet ﷺ would do it. Okay? So this is why he tells Usama, we'll pray ahead. فَلَمَّا جَاءَ الْمُزْدَلِفَ نَزَلَ فَتَوَضَّأَ. So when they reached Muzdalifah, the Prophet ﷺ redid his wudu, but this time he did everything with wudu. He didn't minimize it. ثُمَّ أُقِيمَتِ الصَّلَاةِ فَصَلَّى الْمَغْرِبِ. And then they prayed Maghrib. ثُمَّ أَنَاخَ كُلُّ إِنسَانٍ بَعِيرَهُ فِي مَنْزِلِهِ ثُمَّ أُقِيمَتِ الْعِشَاءِ. Right? So he prayed Maghrib, and then the people there began to tie their camels and situate themselves, and then they prayed Isha. All right, so this is another point when it comes to combining prayers.
So he didn't combine the Maghrib and the Isha.
This is what we're going to talk about right now, right? This is another topic when it comes to combining prayers. When you combine Salah, do you have to do it literally one after the other? When you pray Dhuhr, do you have to pray Asr right after? When you pray Maghrib, do you have to pray Isha right after? The answer is no. The answer is no. Again, there are differences of opinion among scholars, so if you heard it from a sheikh, there are different opinions, okay? But the answer is, the opinion I follow is no. When you are traveling, you have a lot of flexibility. You can pray your Salah as you normally do in its appropriate time without shortening the Salah. That's one option. You can combine Salah without shortening. You can shorten Salah without combining. You can pray Dhuhr 2 rak'ahs, and then 3 hours later pray Asr 2 rak'ahs. You can combine and shorten, right? So you can do the Salah early, you can do it later. You have a lot of flexibility here. So the idea is, if I do Salah and I get distracted with something, right? I get distracted, so I'm combining, I'm traveling, I did Dhuhr, I prayed 2 rak'ahs, and then something happened, your son comes, your little child or your grandchild, and comes and says, I need to use the bathroom, Do you have to tell a child, wait, I have to do my other Salah, and then I'll take you? No, you can go take the child, and then say, I'm hungry, and you go feed them, and you say, I want to walk around, I'm interested in this, and you go and you walk around, and then you go back and you pray your Asr prayer, 2 rak'ahs. Perfectly fine, right? So here you have an example of that. They prayed Maghrib, and then they did something. It might not have been a long period of time, but they situated themselves in Muzdalifah, and then they prayed Isha, right? And then they prayed Isha. And then here Osama says, nobody prayed between Maghrib and Isha. What does that mean? Not just Nafil. What do you pray after Maghrib prayer? Sunnah, right? Then nobody prayed Sunnah prayer. Why? Because the Sunnah, when traveling, is that you don't pray Sunnah prayers.
Except for?
The Sunnah, I'll get there. The Sunnah when traveling is that you don't pray Sunnah prayers, except for the Sunnah of Fajr and Witr prayer. Yeah, the Sunnah of Fajr and Witr prayer. The Prophet ﷺ would not leave these two Sunnahs even while traveling. But the other Sunnah, the Sunnah of Dhuhr, before or after, the Sunnah, or if you want to call it a Sunnah of Asr, before Asr, or the Sunnah of Maghrib, the Sunnah of Isha, the Prophet didn't pray any of that. That is the Sunnah, meaning you get more reward for not praying them than you do for praying them.
When you're traveling or just...
When you're traveling.
Okay, not like every day.
When you are traveling. Why? Because the purpose of combining and shortening prayers is what? To lighten the load. To lighten the load. And so if you still have to maintain the sunnahs, that just increases the load. Right? Now, if you're on an international flight, you have a 14-hour flight, and it's dark outside, they have the lights off in the airplane, and you're bored. I don't know what to do. Is it okay to start praying tahajjud? Or doing night prayers? Or doing extra prayers? Yeah, perfectly fine. Do it. Right? But when it comes to the sunnah prayers, you're traveling, you're going, and let's say you're touring a country. Right? You're there for tourism. And you go and you do salah. Should you feel guilty for not praying the sunnahs? No, not at all. You don't pray the sunnahs and you go and you enjoy your attractions. He's coming in 2 months, and he's
If you go to a child home,
a what home?
child really grew up your parents' home, even though you're traveling, so you don't have to do the sunnah.
If you're going, let's say, to visit your parents overseas, and you're staying there for 2 months, once you arrive, you start praying normally. Yeah.
No, not skip the sunnah.
No. And I'm sure there's Kitab Salah. We'll go over these issues too.
But I just want, he prayed Salah, he prayed the Maghrib, and then he prayed Isha. And then I think they all prayed Isha.
Yeah.
Okay, so now, Nasik and Hajj, I just want to remember, is it combined?
Yes,
Is it
combined.
It is combined,
Yes.
So they don't take by that, they, Salah Maghrib,
No, but what happened here isn't something that's part of the Sharia. Them setting up camp, and that's not part of the Prophet didn't say, when you come to Muzdalifah, pray Maghrib first, then situate yourself, and then, right? It just happened this way.
Yeah, but that means they didn't pray Jama'ah Maghrib.
No, the idea here is that is combining. They did combine.
They did combine.
Just because there's a time gap between
I see.
does not mean it's no longer combining. All right?
So, Hanafi does the same?
In terms of what?
They combining?
In Muzdalifah specifically? Yeah. Hanafis are actually the strictest in this regard. Right? So they say, but what's being asked right now is the following. Hanafis don't observe combining prayers in traveling.
Really?
No.
I didn't know that.
And don't listen to them. Don't listen to them.
Traveling next week, so then
Combine.
But we grew up in.
For this, be Shafi'i, be Malik, be Hanbali.
So I can pick and choose.
And you always hear these funny stories about those who observe the Hanafi opinion in this regard. Like, I've actually seen this before. When we went down to Mexico, there was a local sheikh who's Hanafi. And so when we got before leaving Mexico, remember that trip we would do to go build a home and whatnot? Before leaving Mexico, we decided to pray Dhuhr and Asr. So I gathered people, the Muslims, and we prayed Dhuhr and Asr. Except this Hanafi, he prays Dhuhr. And then on the way, he says, we need to stop because I need to pray Asr. So the entire bus needs to wait for him, right? And the inconvenience for him, and as well as everyone else, why? Because, okay. So don't follow the Hanafi in this regard.
When I went back home last year and the time before, my brothers, they said, we never heard of this combining the.
That's why, right?
We
So
never heard of it.
right. They gotta get out of their bubble.
I think that was.
Sheikh, some Hanafi mashayikh, they do qasr and jam'.
Some Hanafi mashayikh, right? They do the combining. Yeah. So Hanafis, you must shorten prayer while traveling. You must. Meaning, if you pray Dhuhr 4 rak'ahs, your salah is invalid. You have to pray 2. No, Hanafis, right? But you cannot combine, except in Muzdalifah. And they said that we combine here because it's a ritual of Hajj, not because you're traveling. Oh, well.
And Medina, they said you have to pray your sunnah because you're.
That's not true. That's not true. If you're doing Umrah, you might as well pray all 5 salahs, right? I mean, you're there for what? You're there to be in the masjid. You're there to
Yeah, but
feel. No, so for example, I won't do sunnahs. I'll pray dhuhr 4 rak'ahs. Also, I'll pray on the time, right, without combining, but I won't do the sunnahs
Because you're traveling.
because I'm traveling. Yeah.
So when you're traveling, you can do just two for Zuhr and Asr, but not Sunnah.
You could do sunnah if you want, but the sunnah, you get more reward for not doing the sunnah prayer.
That's what I'm asking.
Yes.
Like, I want to get more reward. Okay, so because I'm traveling, that's why I'm asking. So I can do the two for the Dhuhr and two of Asr, and three of Maghrib and two of
Exactly.
yeah. Because Isha there is going to be like 11 o'clock,
Wow.
and Maghrib is like about 9.
What are you going to Seattle?
Yeah. That was in Kilobay, right? It's like I said, my daughter, she said, this isn't us. So what are you saying? She goes, why am I combining guys? I work, so I do not want to get up.
All right, continuing. باب غسل الوجه باليدين من غرفة واحدة. So this is the chapter washing your face with one handful of water. All right. So عن ابن عباس رضي الله تعالى عنهما أنه توضأ فغسل وجهه أخذ غرفة من ماء فمضمض بها واستنشق ثم أخذ غرفة من ماء فجعل بها هكذا أضافها إلى يده الأخرى فغسل بها وجهه ثم أخذ غرفة من ماء فغسل بها يده اليمنى ثم أخذ غرفة من ماء فغسل بها يده اليسرى ثم مسح برأسه ثم أخذ غرفة من ماء فرش على رجليه اليمنى حتى غسلها ثم أخذ غرفة أخرى فغسل بها عن رجله اليسرى فغسل بها يعني رجله اليسرى ثم قال هكذا رأيت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يتوضأ. So here Ibn Abbas performs wudu the way he saw the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام doing it. And the purpose of this hadith is about how much water the Prophet used to use. It's not about what he did, it's about how much he used. So it's constantly emphasizing how much water Ibn Abbas is using to make wudu. And a gharfa is a handful, this much. So he'd use a handful for each part of the body. He used a handful for his face, a handful for each arm. Of course, wiping, you don't need a handful, just your hands being wet, and a handful for each leg. So how much does that come out to in terms of volume? A very small amount. When you look at like a standard water bottle, in fact the small ones, that water in that small water bottle is more than enough. You should have some left over to perform wudu. Imam Ahmad, rahimahullah ta'ala, would perform wudu so conservatively, meaning with water, that the floor under him would be dry. Not a single drop of water would fall on the ground. And so one of his students would actually cover him while making wudu because he was afraid other people would start saying Imam Ahmad doesn't know how to make wudu. But obviously Imam Ahmad knows how to make wudu. I mean, he's applying the hadith. Okay, what does that mean for us today? What that means is the following. If Allah has blessed you with what is seemingly infinite water, to take showers, to wash your dishes, to play, for the kids to play, to do whatever you want, go for it, right? But when it comes to using water for acts of wudu, for acts of worship, specifically for wudu and ghusl, it is more praiseworthy and more in line with the sunnah to use as little as you can. Okay, so what does that mean? It means when you turn on the faucet, turn on very lightly. Just a little bit. And make it with that. That is more in line with the sunnah. Alright? So conservation of water when it comes to acts of worship in Islam is in line with the sunnah. So if somebody comes and says, oh, you're not drenched with water. I mean, sometimes you watch these people make wudu and they're just water splashing everywhere and they're soaked with water. It's not the point, right? That's not more righteous than somebody who who use such minimal water that it dries off without needing to even wipe it, right? In fact, that is more righteous than somebody who's drenched in water after making wudu. Right. Babu ma yaqulu 'inda al-khala. A chapter about what to say when going to the bathroom. عن أنس رضي الله تعالى عنه قال كان النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا دخل الخلاء قال اللهم إني أعوذ بك من الخبث والخبائث. Here Anas رضي الله تعالى عنه said that when the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام would enter al-khala. Khala is that which is empty. So back in the day, where would they use the bathrooms? They would go out to an empty area. And yes, during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, there was a specific area that was known, this is where people go and use the bathroom, right? But they called it khala, the empty area. So when the Prophet would go and enter that place where he's going to use the bathroom, where to relieve himself, he would say a dua. He'd say, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-khubthi wal-khaba'ith. Oh Allah, I seek refuge in you from the khubuth and the khaba'ith. What's that? One understanding is khubuth is the jinn and khaba'ith are the female jinn. Now, this is one understanding. Why? Because the shayateen gather in places that are dirty. You remember that what I said last time? There is a relationship between hygiene and cleanliness and iman. There has to be. It's not a coincidence that those who are very distant from Allah often embrace very unhygienic practices. So the shayateen like these places. And so you seek refuge in Allah from shayateen potentially harming you while there. The other understanding is that khubuth linguistically means that which is evil or dirty. Like insanun khabith, somebody who's just corrupt. They're evil. And khaba'ith means the people of evil. So you're seeking refuge from evil and harm in general. And this is the better understanding. Why? Because dua is more powerful the more general it is. Right? So, for example, what's a more powerful dua? To say, oh Allah, give me XYZ job, give me a job at Amazon with a salary of whatever. Versus saying, oh Allah, provide me a good provision. Which one's better? The second one. Why? Because the first one, you're asking for something limited. Whereas the second one, you're saying, oh Allah, give me good. Right? And Allah might give you multiple streams. But here you're only asking for one. Right? So understanding this dua as meaning evil and the people of evil includes the jinn who could potentially harm you, but goes beyond that. It could be anyone, right? You can imagine, people might be lingering and let's just watch and see what happens. There's some crazy people out there, right? So you see refuge in more than just the jinn, in any and all harm and evil. So memorize this dua. When you enter the bathroom, this is when you say it. So when exactly do you say it? When you enter, the bathroom is fine. Just before using, getting on the toilet is fine. It doesn't really matter the precise time. What matters is that you actually say it. Babu wad'i al-ma'i 'inda al-khala. A chapter of bringing water with you when you go to use the bathroom. عن ابن عباس رضي الله تعالى عنهما أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم دخل الخلاء قال فوضعت له وضوءا فقال من وضع هذا فأخبره فقال اللهم فقهه في الدين. So Ibn Abbas رضي الله تعالى عنه says that the Prophet went to use the bathroom and he got a bucket of water for the Prophet. Here, wudu, right, just for a little bit of technicalities here, is different than wudu. We say wudu. Wudu is a process of making wudu. Wudu is what is used to perform wudu. Right? Another example, so in the Arabic languages, you see this a lot. Wuqud is fire. Waqud is fuel, that which fuels the fire. All right? So here it's referring to water. So Ibn Abbas went and got water for the Prophet ﷺ. So the Prophet asked, who brought this? And he told him, it's me, Ibn Abbas. So the Prophet said, Allahumma faqihhu fid din. He made a dua for Ibn Abbas, saying, may Allah give him understanding of the religion. That's exactly what he was. He was a faqih. He was a senior mufti, right, as we were saying. A senior mufti. And in another hadith, the Prophet said, Allahumma faqihhu fid din wa allimhu ta'wil. On top of teaching him fiqh, he said, may Allah teach you understanding of the Quran, tafsir. And Ibn Abbas is the most senior scholar, the most knowledgeable individual when it comes to Quran. Yeah. So how the dua of the Prophet ﷺ came to light. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. La ilaha illallah. So, why did the Prophet ﷺ make this dua for Ibn Abbas? There is a connection. And the connection was as follows. Ibn Abbas at this time was a young child. Right? He was probably maybe maximum 9-10 years old. Maximum. And appreciating why the Prophet made dua for him, or this particular dua for him, goes back to why did Ibn Abbas bring him water in the first place? Right? He understood, not to make wudu, to wash himself. For the Prophet to clean himself after using the bathroom. So clearly Ibn Abbas understood that cleaning oneself after using the bathroom is an obligation. And he was observant enough to realize the Prophet didn't take any water with him. Now the Prophet probably had rocks around him, that would have sufficed, but Ibn Abbas knew that even if he had rocks, water is still better. So he understood all of this. And then he voluntarily went, without the Prophet telling him, got him water, understanding that the Prophet always loves to do that which is best, that which is better. So he went and he got the water for him. So look at his ability to understand.
So that was
right?
a compliment.
What?
The dua was
No, the dua was the Prophet acknowledging Ibn Abbas, you have strong understanding.
Yeah, so he complimented.
You connect the dots.
Yeah.
So it's a compliment, yes, but also a dua that is in line with a talent or a skill that is manifesting in Ibn Abbas at a very early age, right? So what we can take from this is that when somebody does for us a favor, make dua for them. And the most common dua that we tend to make for somebody who does something for us is what? That's fine, right? Jazakallahu khairan. That's a dua. It's not just saying thank you. Thank you is a thank you. It doesn't mean anything beyond, I acknowledge what you did and I appreciate it. When you say Jazakallahu khairan, you are making dua for this person. May Allah reward you with more. May He give you more. Or may He give you good. Right? Now when it comes to parenting or grandparenting, when you see your child or your grandchild do something for you, ask them for something and they do it, make dua for them. Right? Make dua. Give them the love. And if we were to understand this dua as more than just the Prophet making a dua, but also complimenting Ibn Abbas, well, you compliment these young children. When I listen to certain experts in fields, especially when it comes to the field of parenting or individuals who have very interesting stories, success stories, you'll find that these children had somebody in their life who was encouraging them, who was saying, no, whatever the challenge is, you can overcome it. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. You are a smart person. You are this. You are that. We think it's just these children don't really understand. No, it warps their mindset. When they feel that their parents, who to them is everything, they are everything, are looking at them and see that they feel that their parents see them as strong, competent, capable, and it goes a long way. Right? It gives them self-esteem. It gives them personality. It gives them optimism, and it gives them the ability to succeed. Right? And unfortunately, I don't know how it is in some of your cultures, but in Middle Eastern cultures, you should just see the things parents say to their kids, like, you are as dumb as a donkey, you are dumber than a wall, you are, and just very discouraging things, right? Very demeaning things. A message from the parents that you are worthless, right? Words are extremely, extremely powerful. So be careful how you use them. And the Prophet ﷺ was a master at saying the right things at the right times. And as I've said before, it is absolutely astonishing that anybody who spent any amount of time with the Prophet ﷺ will not leave that setting except having a better opinion of him or leaving in a better state than when they entered, even if they were the enemy of the Prophet ﷺ. Right? So Allahumma salli wa sallim ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. We'll stop at hadith number 118.